Hi, welcome back. Today we're going to take a minute and look at engine operating states. This is very important for you to understand. I'm just going to mention a few. Back when they first came out with the Select engine, the very first electronic engines, I think there was probably in the neighborhood of 18 to 24 operating states. Today that number can go up and I think around the 40 or 45 maybe that I know of. And I haven't seen the natural gas stuff in a while, so I don't know how many operating states are in the natural gas. But what is an operating state? Okay, so when we're doing something, let's say, and I'm comparing the ECM to a person. So let's say a person gets up in the morning and they know they've got to go to work, and when they come home, they got to go out and dig in a flower bed and plant a flower, and then they have to take a shower, and then they have to go to bed. Okay? So that's a fluid process in our head. We get up, you're making your coffee, maybe your tea or whatever, then you're going to get in the car and drive. You might be driving, you get to work, you're thinking about what you got to do at work, and sometimes what you want to do after work, or about booking that vacation at lunchtime. All these things are just fluid thoughts going through your head. The ECM doesn't work like that. The ECM has to be in defined, controlled states. Think of it like like taking a trip. You're driving down a road. That road is in operating state, or some people call them modes. You come up to a stop sign, you stop, you turn right. You're on a different road, you're in a different mode or operating state. The ECM lives in a very black and white world. It's in this operating state or it's in that operating state. Each operating state has its own set of instructions and its own tables, which are reference values or limits, low limits, high limits to what it's allowed to do with everything it controls while it's in that state. Okay? So I hope I explained that as clearly as I can. That's an operating state. So we're going to look at some of the important ones that you need to know for this, and all the rest of them we're not going to look at today. We've got time to look at those in the future. Okay, so here we go. We're talking about these because you're going to be seeing them in the data logs, and they're an important piece of information that you need to put in the forefront of your mind before you start thinking about anything else that's going on in that data log. So, crank state. The engine has to see crankshaft or camshaft movement or RPM for it to enter the crank state. The engine can only ever start when it is in crank state. Okay? Very important. Air fuel control state. The ECM is commanding maximum fueling to the injectors, but there is not enough boost available at the moment in the intake manifold. So to keep from overheating the exhaust, the ECM will reduce the amount of fuel, or reduces fueling, same thing, to the injectors. The amount of fuel injected on a power stroke is reduced from its normal commanded to lower the heat in the combustion chamber. So all air fuel control is, hey, normally in this situation I'm putting in a gallon of fuel a minute. I'm only going to put in a half a gallon of fuel a minute. That's a crude example, but you got the idea. Next, maximum fueling state. The ECM is commanding the injectors to inject the maximum allowed amount of fuel for the RPM and boost that is available at the moment in time, and that is the most fuel it can ever inject at that time, or you've reached your horsepower limit, and so it's not going to put any more fuel in. And you may or may not see maximum fueling in this class, but you're going to see it again in the future with another problem. Engine stop state. When you see engine stop, that means that the key is on, the ECM is awake, and it's waiting for crankshaft speed or camshaft speed. And once it sees that, it will go into the process of fueling the injectors, looking at other sensors, looking for feedback from the rail and other sensors, oil pressure, all those things, as the engine is cranking and the ECM is trying to start it. If it doesn't see crankshaft speed or camshaft speed or both, no fueling will ever be commanded because it doesn't know that the engine is moving or any parts of the engine are moving. So it just sits there awake. Think of yourself sitting in an easy chair, looking at the wall, just daydreaming. Maybe you're waiting to go someplace, somebody's going to pick you up, and you're just sitting there waiting. When that car pulls in the yard, you're going to get up and move. The ECM is sitting in the chair waiting for something to happen. And what's waiting to happen is to see movement of the crankshaft or camshaft so it can get up and start doing what it needs to do to get the engine to start. Next, engine warm-up state. That is simply a state where the ECM is it sees when it starts, the exhaust temperatures are cold, the water temperature, oil temperature is cold, so it's going to warm everything up, and it's going to watch the fueling a little bit while it warms it up. What you need to know is on this particular engine that we built, there is no OEM plugged into the ECM. So everything that comes from the OEM world, the ECM doesn't know. That would be after treatment values for pressure, temperature, SCR values, NOx sensor values, DEF tank values, switches that would be in the cab to tell it to go into PTO mode, throttle circuit, PTO idle circuits, all those things are missing. Vehicle speed, none of that's there. The ECM doesn't see it. So while we're trying to start this engine, there's a bus load of active faults because those sensors aren't there. I mean, there's lots of faults, but they don't matter when you're trying to do this because those are all things that have to deal with how the engine behaves once it's running. We're trying to get it running. Okay, next, low idle state. That's base idle speed controlled by the calibration in the ECM, and that's where the ECM has to get the engine and maintain it RPM-wise before everything's happy, because that's where it needs to idle at, idle speed. High governor speed or high speed governor is the maximum allowed RPM that the ECM is allowed to spin the engine over, and that's controlled by the calibration. So that's what you need to know to get started. Let's go to our first set of data logs that we have in the next video.